Hello, welcome back to my Terraforming Mars strategy guide. Today we're gonna look at episode 3, part 2, strategies, and today we're gonna talk about the Jovian strategy and the green tag strategy. Okay, so now let's talk about Jovian tags. The rest of the strategies here are pretty much extensions of the card strategy, if that makes sense, but for good measure I'll just go through them quickly. Jovian tags, is it really strategy? I mean, if you don't get Jovian amplifiers, can it really be considered a strategy? To be fair, this is more like synergy, but you know, a lot of people like Jovians. Let's talk about them. If you want to see a game example on the Mars app where I go for Jovian tags and I'm Saturn systems, then you can check out episode 19. So Jovian tags is a strategy that can work in both short and long games, but I think I tend to favor long games a little bit more because then you have more time to get the Jovians. Jovians are great in greedy 2-player games, for instance, because it's a part of the card strategy. Naturally, if you play a million cards, then you're bound to find a lot of Jovians. It can also work in 5-player games, but it's a bit more risky. The thing about the Jovian cards, they're really expensive though. They kind of invite you to have a big engine, a lot of titanium production, and sometimes in 5-player games the game is just over by generation 7 and you really don't even have time to play your amplifier because it's just so expensive in these short games. Saturn system is a perfect corporation if you want to go for Jovians, because every time a Jovian tag is played you get 1 mega credit production and also you get a titanium production, which is nice for playing these expensive Jovian tags. And the funny thing, Saturn system is actually, I think, slightly better in 5-player games, but it's good regardless of player number. The reason it's better in 5-player games maybe is that then you have 4 opponents who might also play in some Jovians sometimes, so you get a lot of free stuff. But you can also make an argument that it's good in 2 or 3-player games, because when the games are longer and more greedy, then people are more likely to play Jovians. Let's talk about Jovian amplifiers. There are 4 Jovian amplifiers in the vanilla game, and funnily enough, they're not actually adding more amplifiers in the expansions, so you only have these 4. And yes, I am counting Terraforming Ganymede as an amplifier. I mean, if you play this cast as your last Jovian tag, then it literally is an amplifier. I think the Jovial amplifiers are pretty well known. A lot of people favor these, and this is like the set collection of this game. It can be really strong. Like sometimes you get 60 points in Jovians alone or something, and that's a lot of points, so it's really worth noting. However, it's not always these cards are good. I think people just, oh, it's a Jovian amplifier, I have to keep it. I also made this mistake with this starting hand where I started with Iron Mining Industries and oh, it's an amplifier, I have to keep this. I shouldn't have. So sometimes it's a little bit of a bait. So basically it's a little bit out of your control. Like you can decide to start the game, alright, I'm gonna go for Jovian tags today, but then ultimately it comes down to whether or not you pick up any amplifiers, because without amplifiers you're not getting so much out of your Jovians. In fact, all the Jovian cards are pretty expensive. The Jovian tag itself costs something on these cards, so this means that if you're not getting a Jovian amplifier, then usually the Jovian cards are actually pretty bad. So how many VP does an amplifier actually give you? It's really hard to answer this, because sometimes it's like 1 point or sometimes it's like 12 points. So if you're having a good game, and this is like maybe even generous, but if you're having a good game, I think a Jovian amplifier on average could give you like 6 VP, and if you get this, that's totally fine. And if you manage in your game to get this many Jovian tags, then it's perfect. Then it's really good actually. So how many Jovians would you have to have for this to be worth it? So let's do the math here. 4-2, 4-2, 4-4. So if we say that in the late game a victory point is worth 8 mega credit and the cast costs 3, for example Iron Mining Industries, this is like the most expensive of them, and that's because it comes with a lot of engine. But if you get 6 Jovians, this is worth it, because then it adds up to 48, and that's more than the 44 the card costs. But if you only get 5 Jovians and you play Iron Mining Industries in the last generation, it's actually not that good. It's a little bit lower than the average. But then again, if you play Iron Mining Industries sooner in the game, it's of course back to being really good, because then you also get the engine building capabilities of this card. Then we got Ganymede Colony. If we set a victory point to be 8 in the last generation, well, then you only need 3 Jovian to actually make this card work. And you need 4 Jovian tags to make water import from Europa worth it. And Terraforming Ganymede, you kind of need 5 Jovian tags to make this work. If you are playing Saturn systems, of course Jovians are better, because then you get 1 mega credit production every time a Jovian tag is put into play. And then you might be inclined to play your amplifiers a little bit sooner, but even with the +1 mega credit production, I still think you should consider waiting before playing the amplifiers. Usually you play these amplifiers in the last generation, except for Iron Mining Industries. So usually you have better things to spend your mega credit on than just playing an amplifier early just for the +1 mega credit. It's not that good. Jovian amplifiers should be played in the last generation, except of course for Iron Mining Industries. Also there are a few other exceptions, we'll talk about those. So Iron Mining Industries is actually kind of cool, because this card can be played in any phase of the game depending on the situation. In the early game you can play this card as soon as possible, because it gives you a lot of money income, like 2 titanium production, 2 mega credit production. I mean, really what you should do, you should play it as soon as it makes sense for you. Maybe in the early game you had better engine building options available to you. In that case you would wait, but mostly you want to play this as soon as possible, if that makes sense. Sometimes it can even be worth it to just pass an entire generation just to complete Iron Mining Industries in the next generation. So really it comes down to, do you have any better engine building options available to you? If yes, then you wait before you play Iron Mining Industries. And I'm talking about the early to mid game, of course, because in the mid to late game you really want to favor Iron Mining Industries over like mega credit production in general, because then you're also more focused on getting VP, and Iron Mining Industries, like we talked about, it can give you a lot of VP. But like we mentioned, you kind of need a few Jovian tags for this card to be worth it, at least from a VP point of view. In the late game, if you play this in the last generation, of course you're only playing this card to get all the VP. But then like we talked about, just to play this card only for the VP, that is really expensive. So you need to have at least 6 Jovian tags for this to actually be worth it. But it's not even like this is just the average values. Really what it comes down to, what are your available plays in the last generation? If your best play to play Iron Mining Industries, go for it. If there's another player that will give you even more victory points, do that. Like maybe you could take the landlord from somebody or something that's even more impactful than Iron Mining Industries. You just have to do the math in the last generation, that's all I'm saying. Then we got Ganymede Colony. In 9 out of 10 games, this should be played in the late game, preferably in the very last generation of the game. Possible exceptions, if you literally have 1 million titanium, you can consider playing it a little bit before. If you have Immigrant City, technically yes, it will give you like 1 mega credit production. If you have Satellite, Galilean Way Station, the same. It could be something you consider, but really it should only be if you have like too much titanium. Otherwise, this 1 mega credit production is not really what should do it for you. But sometimes it is worth it, because the thing is, you want to be playing this card sooner or later. So if you play it a little bit before and you get 1 mega credit production, it could be worth it. Also depends how much discount you have. Really what it comes down to is, do you have other better engine building options available to you? If yes, then play Ganymede Colony in the last generation, just for the VP. And finally, there's of course also the Mayor milestone to consider. I mean, once again, it's really not that important, but it could come into play that you really want the Mayor milestone. But you just have to be really careful you don't get baited, because playing Ganymede Colony just to get the Mayor milestone, that's like a big hit on your economy. Especially when we're talking about the early to mid game, when it's usually the time that the Mayor milestone is gonna be claimed. Then we've got water import from Europa. In 9 out of 10 games, same, you want to play this in the very last generation, in the late game. Now, once again, if you have a lot of titanium, then this card could actually be okay to play a bit sooner. The thing is, you can also spend titanium to use this action. So for 12 mega credits or 4 titanium, you could build a water. So if you have like 1 million titanium, then of course you want to play this a bit earlier. Just don't get baited into thinking that it's like really good value, because when you think about it, a TR is worth 8. And then the placement bonus on water is worth around 4 if you're generous. And that adds up to 12. So that's exactly what you're getting with this card. So even after you build this expensive card for 25 mega credits, then you just get the action for building a water for 12. And that's literally exactly what a water is worth. So it's not that good. So just be careful you just don't spend 25 mega credits just to completely mess up your own engine because you think this card should be used to make water. It's really not the point of this card. It's really rare actually that this card should be used to build water. Usually you should play this in the last generation only because of the VP capabilities. But of course it could be that you have some water synergy, so water is a little bit better for you. In that case, I don't know, it's still questionable, but you know, it's something to consider. It could also be that you have kelp farming and penguins in your hand, and in that case it could be kind of nice for you to build some water, especially if you're thinking about building the standard project aquifer for 18 mega credits. Well, then obviously this is a better choice, but then is it really? Because then you also spend 25 mega credits just so you can get water a bit cheaper, so it still has to be a consideration. And of course, if you are going for the Terraforming milestone, you're really close to your opponent, then building water makes sense. Then we got Terraforming Ganymede. In 9 out of 10 games, this should also be played in the last generation. But Terraforming Ganymede is actually one of the fun cards, because if you're having a literal god game, you can also use this card in the mid game for its engine building capabilities. But to be fair, this almost never happens. I mean, Jovian Tags are pretty expensive, so when do you really have enough Jovian Tags played this early on? And on top of that, if you have to play this really expensive cards just to get engine, it almost never happens. But when it does, it's really fun. I think it would have to be like 6+ Jovian Tags you need to have with this. So on the plus side, if we're still in the mid game and you manage to play this with 6 Jovian Tags, then you're getting 6 TR, and that's actually engine. That's like 6 mega credit production, right? So that actually does matter. But on the other hand, if you later in the game pick up even more Jovian Tags, then you kind of feel a little bit bad that you played this a bit sooner. But it's not that simple. What you have to consider is it better for you to get the mega credit you got for playing this in the mid game, or is it better for you to get the, let's say, +2 victory points because you picked up another 2 Jovian tag by the end of the game? And once again, if you're fighting for the Terraformer milestone, this card can actually be a lot of fun to just play and just snatch that from one of your opponent. But for this to be worth it, like I said, you really have to have like 5 or 6 Jovian tags. It also works with the benefactor, but that is the award. So if you're fighting for the benefactor, then you still play Terraforming Ganymede in the very last generation, because then it's like a big surprise factor. Oh shit, he's beating me in benefactor. I did not expect that. So when should you go for Jovian tags? If you get Jovian amplifiers, you consider going for Jovian tags. You can also collect Jovian tags and just hope that you'll get a Jovian amplifier later on. If you do decide to go for Jovian tags, maybe you have a Jovian amplifier in your hand, then you should really consider keeping most Jovian tags. And I say most, it's actually not all Jovian tags that are worth it to keep, even if you're going for it. It depends like on your titanium production, and is your economy strong enough to build all of these Jovian? Maybe you have something better you can do. So it's not like a given you keep all Jovian tags just because you have an amplifier. And regardless, even if you're not going for the Jovian amplifier and the Jovian strategy, then you should still play the good Jovian tags. Some Jovian tags are pretty strong cards even without the amplifiers. But to be honest, most of the Jovian cards are actually pretty bad if you do not get a Jovian amplifier. So most of the bad Jovian cards you only play if you hope to get a Jovian amplifier, or maybe you have a Jovian amplifier in your hand already. So like we mentioned, Jovian amplifiers is a big part of this. Also, if you're Saturn systems, then of course you're a little bit more inclined to go for Jovian tags in general. And also if you're playing vanilla, I think this might surprise some people, but actually the Jovian tags and the Jovian strategy is actually better if you're playing only vanilla. For example, if you're playing on the Mars app, it's actually only vanilla and also preludes. If you bought that one, there's a little bit of cards in preludes, but not that many. So if you're playing on the Mars app, or if you're playing only with the base game, then it's actually better to go for Jovian tags, because the chance to get a Jovian amplifier is bigger in vanilla, because there are only 4 Jovian amplifiers, and even with all the expansions they added, they don't add more Jovian amplifiers, so there are only the 4 of them, no matter how many expansions you play with. So if you're playing with all of the expansions, maybe you have twice as many cards as if you're only playing with vanilla. So this is why it's a little bit more likely to get a Jovian amplifier if you're playing vanilla. Worth noting, I'm only talking about amplifiers here. Jovian tags in general are kind of just as likely to get if you're playing vanilla or with all the expansions, because what Stronghold Game does is every time they release an expansion, they add in the same percentage of Jovian tags to the new expansion. So I'm not talking about Jovian tags, I'm only talking about the 4 Jovian amplifiers. These 4 cards you're more likely to get if you only play vanilla. Of course, if you're a card drawer, then there's a higher likelihood of you getting an amplifier, and you really need these amplifiers to make these Jovians worth it. This is what I mean when I say that the Jovian strategy is usually better in 2 or 3 player games, because they're kind of longer in terms of generations. Because if you're playing a 5 player game and the game is over already on generation 7, it's actually really hard to make the Jovian strategy work, because the Jovian tags are so expensive and you just don't have enough time to collect and play all of these expensive Jovian tags. Finally, let's talk about green tags. I'm talking about animal tags, microbe tags, plant tags. Now, green tag synergy can be really good, so I'm calling it a strategy here, but is it really a strategy? Maybe it's more like synergy. I mean, you can make the argument that this entire video is all about synergy and not strategies, but no matter how you slice it, green tags can be very powerful, so we should talk about it. Now, green tags, that is a mid to late game strat. It's better for long games, and there are a few reasons for this. First of all of the green tag amplifiers is like cards you kind of play in the mid game. Secondly, they are all like VP, right? So VP cards you usually want to play in the last half of the game. You don't really play a lot of green tags in the early game. They don't give you engine, and usually you can't even play them because of the requirement and stuff like this. And finally, animal and micro cards are a big part of this, and these cards just get better the longer the game goes, because mostly animals and microbes are action cards, which means that every generation you can keep adding microbe or animals to these cards, which means that if you get all of this up and running, you really want to play the long game, because every single generation you just get free VP from all the action cards, animals and microbes and stuff like this. If you're getting like 4 free victory points every generation, it's really hard for anyone to actually compare with this. So it's definitely in your interest to let the game drag out as long as possible. And this is also why I think the green tags in general are like part of the card strategy, because you want the game to go low, and naturally when you're playing a lot of cards, when you're seeing a lot of cards, drawing a lot of cards, you're gonna get a lot of green tag synergy, and the more green tag synergy you can get, the better. And also keep in mind that green tags can increase in value. So when you play these green tags, it's also really important. For instance, Advanced Ecosystem, it's a card that gives you 3 victory points. Usually you play this in the last generation because it only gives VP, and on top of that it has 3 green tags, and these green tags can be really valuable if you wait before you play them. So for example, if you have Viral Enhancers, Decomposers and Ecological Zone, all of a sudden instead of giving you 3 VP, this is like 5 VP and 3 plants, and this value is like insane. So if you think about it, 5 VP for 11 mega credits, that's way better value than you're getting from a Jovian amplifier, usually. And green tag synergy is also kind of cool because it can kind of turn bad cards into good cards. So for instance, we got Adaptive Legion. This card I'm not so crazy about. I think it's one of the weaker cards in the set. Like imagine if this card did not have a plant tag, it would be literally unplayable. So remember the card costs 3, so for 12 mega credit you get 1 plant production. That is horrendous, especially considering that okay, you can play this in the early game, but you don't really want to because in the early game you need money income, and then you play this in the mid game and the value is bad, man. Yeah, so I'm really sorry, but this is not a good card. However, what if you can actually use this plant tag for something useful? Maybe you have insects or nitrogen rich asteroid or something like this. Then all of a sudden this card could be worth it. So this is like one of the beauties of this game, that tags matter so much in this game. So all of a sudden a bad card like this can all of a sudden become good if you have a lot of green tag synergy. Or to put it in a different way, a way that you zoomers understand, well, there you go. Zoomers like memes, right? Actually, maybe boomers also like memes. I don't know, are memes unpopular? Are they No, they're still popular. I think the kids are really down with the memes these days. So maybe it's for all of us. This is for all of us. So instead of Adaptive Legion plus insects, it could also be like Adaptive Legion plus Ecological Zone, but even this might not be worth it because then you're just getting like another half a point. Still questionable, but you get my point. Adaptive Legion, bad card, but if you have green tag synergy, it could be a good card. So if you're going for this green tag synergy shenanigans, which cards should you actually be looking out for? Meat Industries, this card is amazing. It could also be the GMO contract, which is a thermal card, or it could also be this Topsoil contract, which is a promo card. I actually thought there was a Pathfinder card, so this is why I didn't include it initially, but this is like the same idea. If you play microbes or if you play animals, you get a little bit of stuff. And these cards are like perfect with the card strategy where you also go for green tags, because like we talked about, this is like how you go God mode. If you get a little bit of stuff every time you play some of these, or every time you do some of this, it's like a big ingredient of how to go God mode. The late game plant cards, these cards are of course also really good if you're going for green tags, but these cards are like good in general. So even if you're not going for green tags, these cards are most of the time still worth it to pick up no matter what strategy you're going for. But obviously if you are playing with green tags, these are excellent and you should keep them every single time. Also the animal cards of course also really good. You can maybe even get more animals on your card, especially if the game goes longer, and just the fact that this has an animal tag. If you have enough green tag synergy, just the animal tag alone is worth something for you. And like we talked about, if it is the last generation and you still haven't managed to play a bird yet, you can just wait until everyone has passed, and then you can play this card to just grief one of your opponents, making sure that it cannot build the greenery in the extra round. Very annoying. The only other thing I want to say about animals is that if you have no animals, you're sad. But if you have animals, you're happy. So how many animals do you have to have on your animal cards for it to be worth it? As a rule, you kind of need like 1 victory point on your animal cards, and then it's like okay, but really you want 2 or more. If you have 2 victory point on any animal card, I don't care which one it is, then it's definitely worth it. And if you have some nice green tag synergy going on, then 1 victory point on an animal card is plenty, because then the tag is useful for other purposes. And yeah, in case you were wondering, this is actually me bringing a Venusian animal to the Dragon roller coaster in Legoland in Denmark. I think exactly 1 out of 7 Legoland employees thought this was a good idea. Now let's talk about something that's really cool and that a lot of people don't think about, I think. Because everyone likes the Jovian amplifiers. Everyone thinks they're so good, and usually yes they are, but so are these cards. I think these cards are really being slept on. So if you're having a good game and you're playing Jovians, maybe 6 VP average for the Jovian amplifier, it's pretty fair, I think. Sometimes you'll get less, sometimes you get more. 6 VP average is not far off if you're having a good game. This number might even be generous. But here's the thing, all the Jovian amplifiers, these cards are really expensive. Iron Mining Industries, 41, Ganymede Colony, 20, Water Import from Ethiopia, 25, Terraforming Ganymede, 33. Really expensive. So what I think a lot of people fail to realize is that you're only going for Jovian amplifiers, but the green tags, these can give just as much victory points. And usually the cards are a lot cheaper. So let's actually compare some of these. Now first of all of these numbers I'm coming up with here, they are not based in anything scientific at all. These are literally just numbers I'm pulling pulling out of my black hole. And these are simply numbers I come up with based on my experience and my thoughts and my feelings. They're nothing to do with science. That being said, we should still do the math on some of these because it's a lot of fun and also it's quite eye-opening, I think. So imported nitrogen, it comes with 1 TR, so that's 1. And then you get 3 microbes, you can put it on ants, that's 1.5. And then you have 2 animals, that's another 2 points if you put it on birds or something. So even without considering the plants, that's 4.5 points. So in the right circumstance, imported nitrogen could be worth maybe 7 points. Maybe 5 points is even a bit low here, but 7 points is also completely reasonable if you can use the plants. Then we got a large convoy. This card is also really good if you have an animal card where animals are worth 1 per animal. So if we do the math, the card comes with 2 victory points, then we have the water, that's 1 victory point, and then we have the 4 animals. So that's a total of 7 victory points and 2 cards just for this card. So cards like these and also stuff like Miranda, this is why it's really important to have at least 1 card where the animals are worth 1 victory point per animal. And worth noting with the large convoy, in my experience, if you don't have one of these cards, if you only have one of the animal like pets where they only give half a point per animal, then more often than not it's actually better to just take the 5 plants and build a greenery. I think if you do take the 4 animals from this card, it really has to be on fish or predators or some other cards that gives you 1 victory point per animal. A little bit of a fun combo that I tried once or twice is like actually using large convoy on Martian Zoo. And the idea here is then the 4 animals is actually equal to 4 mega-credit production. So is it good? Nah, I'm not sure, but it's a bit fun. So you get the 4 animals, which is kind of like 4 mega-credit production on the Martian Zoo. Then you get 2 cards, which could be kind of nice in the early game. Then you also get a water, so you can get even more cards. It's just a funny combo I just wanted to mention. But usually you should play the large convoy in the last generation, or maybe a little bit sooner if you want to get the last water before that parameter closes completely, and then you should use it on fish or something. So really this combo is like a classic, but it's a classic for good reason, because if you have fish and large convoy, it's 7 victory points at the end of the game, and also you get 2 cards. Really good. Then we got viral enhancers. I think a lot of people really don't appreciate how good this card is, but worth noting, this card is only good if you go for green tags and if you have a lot of green tag synergy going on. If you got no green tags, of course this is a bad card. It's a waste of 9 gold, but it really doesn't take much to get this card worth it. Let's say you have fish in your hand, or you're planning to go for green tags, maybe you have an ecological zone, or just advanced ecosystem. It's plenty. The thing about viral enhancers is it's so cheap, it comes with a science tag, and just when you play the card, just then you get 1 plant. But all of these are like hidden bonuses. It's easier to understand at the end of the game. Oh, my Jovian amplifier, I won because that gave me 8 victory points. But maybe viral enhancer gave you just as much, you just didn't think about it. Like all the plants and all the extra animals and microbes and stuff, it really does add up. It's a very good card. So I put on 5 victory points here for viral enhancers, and to be fair, that's only if you're having a really good game with a lot of green tech synergy. You could also make an argument for maybe 3 victory points, but then you also get like a lot of plants, maybe 8 plants or something, so then we're back to 5 anyway, right? Because like we mentioned, this card is also a plant amplifier, sort of. I mean, you really can't underestimate how many green tags there are, especially if you're going for green tags. And you also can't underestimate the value of the flexibility. Sometimes you just really need 1 plant or 2 plants so you can build a greenery. Then you can just play decomposers, and instead of taking the microbe, you can take the 1 plant and then you can build a greenery. It's perfect. Herbivores, I just placed it on 4 victory points. This is a card where every time you place a greenery, you get an animal on this card worth like half a point. So to get to 4 victory points, you kind of need to have placed 7 greeneries after playing this card, because remember, the card already comes with 1 animal. So this is probably only happening if you have a lot of plant production, stuff like this. But even if herbivores only gives you 2 victory points, it's probably still worth it, because remember, the card costs 3, so that's 15 total you're paying for this. In the last generation, that's still good enough, considering that a VP in the last generation is 8, so if you're getting 2 for 15, that's a little better than 2 for 16. And on top of that, you get to decrease someone's plant production, which is also kind of nice. Then we got Venusian animals, and this card is really good. This is only if you're playing with the Venus expansion, but I have had games, I'm not kidding, where this card just gave me like 20 victory points. This card can be really good if you got a lot of science tags. And the thing is, a lot of the science tag you can just keep, and then you can play them after you play Venusian animals. So kind of what you do is the important science tag, the really high impact science tag, you just play them as soon as possible, right? But a lot of the science tag, it doesn't really matter if you play them now or you play them later. So really you're just holding a lot of science tags in your hand land, and then when you can finally play Venusian animals, then you can play all of these science tags. So if you can manage to play it and you have a lot of science tag, this is amazing. But the thing is, this is 18% Venus on the Venus scale, and that is really hard, because it's really hard to predict when your opponents are actually going to terraform Venus. Venus is not one of the 3 parameters you need to close the game, unless you play with this optional rule that you also need Venus to close the game, but usually people don't do this. Usually it's only water, oxygen and temperature. So let's assume Venus is not one of the global parameters you need to close the game. In that case, it's so hard to predict if people are actually going to terraform Venus. So likely you actually have to terraform Venus a lot yourself in order to play this card. So this is where this card gets a little bit more fair. It's not completely overpowered, because sometimes the 18% Venus is extremely hard. But if it is 18 Venus and you got this and you got a lot of science tag, go for it. It's amazing. You get so much value. Then we got advanced ecosystem. And like I said, if you have decomposers, ecological zone, easy. That's 5 points right there. Decomposers is really cheap, but if you're going for green tags, I don't think it's out of the question that you have like 3 victory points on this card. So that would be like 9 microbes you've gathered on this card, and I think that's entirely plausible. And then we got ecological zone. I just put 5 victory points. I don't think that's entirely unreasonable. Remember, the cards already comes with 2 tags, so all you need is to get another 8 green tags, and then you're up to your 5 victory points on this card. I don't think that's entirely out of the question. So these are like sort of the average values. I mean, once again, I don't have any science at all to back this up, but all I'm saying is, look at this amplifier over here, 6 victory points average, and then look at these cards over here. It's almost as good, and these are a lot cheaper. So all I'm saying is, do not underestimate these victory point cards on the green tag strategy. These can be just as impactful as Jovian amplifiers. In fact, let me show you a print screen here of the game I had on the Mars app. Obviously, this was like a god game, so I'm getting like a lot of green tag synergies, and my points are quite crazy here. But this is just an example to show you how much stuff you can actually get. So if we do the math on this adds up to 54 victory points I get just by having stuff on top of my cards. And okay, you could argue that security fleet, physics complex is not really green tags. Okay, so let's say 47, but that's like, if you're having a good Jovian amplifier game, it's probably not even 47, right? And worth noting, this is on the Mars app, so this is like only vanilla and preludes. So if you're playing like in real life, it's not unheard of. It actually happens pretty often that I have more than 100 victory points on top of my cards, mainly from green tags, but also stuff like security fleets and floaters and stuff like this. And on the Mars app, I've had other games where I've gotten even more points than this on green tags, but this is just the only game like I had available. Anyway, it's not important. The point I'm trying to get across here is that I think that green tags can be just as good as Jovian amplifiers, if not better. Other cards you should be looking for when you're playing for green tags, also of course these plant amplifiers. These cards can be really good, and there's a little bit of synergy going on, especially with herbivores and stuff. So the more greenery you get out, the more animals you get with this card. There's a little bit of synergy here, but there's also a little bit of anti-synergy, because the thing is, when you're going for green tags, oh, I'm gonna make Mars a better place, it's gotta be green, it's gotta be animals, plants, it's gotta be great, and you kind of feel inclined to like make this beautiful green planet, but really it's in your best interest to let the game drag out. So the anti-synergy I'm talking about here is maybe you don't want to put as many greeneries to close the game as normally, because then you're actively helping to close the game. But I think this is only like a minor consideration. You could think about it, if oxygen is the last parameter to close, maybe it's in my best interest to let the game drag out a little bit, but usually just play the plants, play the green tags, you should be fine. Ecology research we talked about in the last iteration. I think this card is amazing. I might just play a lot of colonies and slam this card, get a bunch of plant production, but especially when we're talking about green tag synergy, look at what this card actually gives you. It gives you 3 green tags, it gives you an animal, and it gives you 2 microbes. Needless to say, if you have a lot of green tag synergy, this can also be a lot of victory points on top of the plant production you're getting. Then we got nitrogen rich asteroid, and the thing is, I think I've always been hyping on insects, but this card is actually also really good. This card, it might look pretty expensive, but it actually gives you 3 terraform rating. So even if you don't have the plant tags you need to fulfill the requirement here, just getting 3 terraform rating and 1 plant production for 31, that's a okay deal. I mean, it's not great. If you do the math on it, a terraform rating is worth 8, so if you're getting 3 of those, that's 24, and then you play 34 for the card, because remember the cards cost 3, so that leaves 10 mega credits that you're then using to get 1 plant production. It's not that bad. It's still better than adaptive lesion, cost 9, but then the card is 3 as well, so still 2 better than adaptive lesion. And the math here, that's even just for 1 plant production. If you actually get 3 plant tags and can get the 4 plant production from this card, that's insanely good. So these are also cards I want to look out for when I play the green tag synergy. And then of course we have protected habitat. Always when we are having plant production, protected habitat is really good. It's also good for the green tag strategy, because when you're playing this, usually you have microbes and animals, and protected habitats also prevent enemies from doing those. So Protected Habitats is definitely a card I would value very highly if I go for green text. Like, look at Virus, just removes 2 of your fish. That hurts, man. Not to mention the action cards that also can remove your animals or your plants. So we got Predator or Ants. So Protected Habitat, it just really feels good to play this card when you're going for green text. So we talked a lot about animals, but don't sleep on microbes either. These can also be quite impactful. So there are 2 microbe cards where the microbes are worth half a point per microbe, and that's Ants and Venusian Insects. Venusian Insects is only if you play with the Venus expansion. And once again, 12% Venus, that's also pretty rough, so it's not that often you see this card. But if you do get these cards, then in the mid game or the late game, it could be quite nice for you to actually build a colony in Enceladus, so that you once or twice can put a lot of microbes on these cards. It can be quite a lot of points. Ants does require you to take a microbe from another card, but it can be from one of your opponents. But even if the opponents do not have a microbe to take, you can still take it from one of your bad microbe cards. You can just steal from tardigrades or GHG producing bacteria, some trash like this. Another interesting card I also want to put some attention to here is Sulfur Eating Bacteria. This card is actually kind of cool. It requires you to have 6% Venus, so it's not that hard to get, but sometimes it's a little bit punishing, a little bit annoying. But if you get this card and you also have the Enceladus colony out there, then it's actually kinda your own personal Luna in a sense. Because if you think about it, all the microbes are worth 3 mega credits per microbe. So if you have a colony here and you trade when it's maxed, that's like 6 microbes, so that's 18 gold. So if you can get this down in the early game, you're likely the only one who will have microbes around the table this early on. And when that happens, then this is like your own personal Luna, but not only that, it's also completely uncontested. You're the only one who's going to fly here. So just another little fun combo that I play sometimes. It feels really good when you play it. But if we are talking about the mid to late game, probably Ants, Venusian Insects is better with Enceladus. Or it could also be that you have Extreme Cold Fungus. This card is also actually really nice in conjunction with these two, because the action of Extreme Cold Fungus, that alone is like 1 free victory point every generation. That's pretty good. And also we got this sort of new promo card here, Bactoviral Research. Again, if you have a lot of science tags, this can actually give a lot of stuff. So this is pretty cool as well. It also gives you 1 card, which is nice. So microbe cards are really good if you can get microbes on these cards, but of course, if you cannot, they're useless. So how to improve your chances of getting a lot of green text synergy and get all the combo pieces you need to make this go absolutely insane. Once again, card draw is really nice, it makes sense. The more cards you get, the more cards you will see, the more green text you will get, and the more synergy you can build. And once again, try to make sure that the game drags out a little bit, because when the game goes long in terms of generation, then you'll have more times to collect all the microbes and all the animals and all the free victory points you get every generation. And this one is really important. Get any animal card worth 1 victory point per animal. I don't care which it is, but just get 1. And the reason, of course, there's so many effects in this game that just can give an animal to another card, so having one of these animals worth 1 victory point per animal is really important. And also keep all the good green tags, especially the green tags that can end up giving you a lot of victory points. It's like keeping a Jovian amplifier. Sometimes it's worth it, even if it's in the early game. But it's not only these victory point amplifiers, it could be any of the green tags we talked about in this chapter. Like all of them can be really good. But of course, like we talked about in the first video, if you pick up a card in the early game and you're not gonna use it until much later, make sure that your economy can handle it, otherwise you can really tank yourself. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have anything you want to debate with me in the comments, if you have any nice things I forgot about, make sure to write it. I'll be game to discuss any of this with you. And I promise the next video is gonna be shorter, I promise.